In today's episode, we're diving into 3 horrifying stories of people who lost their lives while taking selfies with deadly animals. From a young American man facing off against an aggressive bear to an Indian man who broke into a zoo enclosure to snap a photo with a lion. But first, let's begin with the story of Jessica. It was July 15, 2014, when a private exotic animal collection outside Houston, Texas would become the scene of one of America's most horrific tiger attacks. For Jessica Martinez and her best friend Amy Chen, both 23, what started as an exciting weekend adventure would end in unimaginable tragedy. Private exotic animal collections had exploded across Texas in the early 2000s. By 2014, the state housed more tigers in private hands than existed in the wild in India. Over 3,000 big cats living in backyards, private compounds, and self-proclaimed sanctuaries. Loose regulations and wealthy enthusiasts had created a dangerous combination that wildlife experts had been warning about for years. Jessica and Amy had been inseparable since their high school days in Houston's suburbs. Now, both working as dental assistants at the same practice, they spent most of their weekends together seeking out new adventures. Jessica's iPhone 5S was filled with their weekend memories, hiking trips, beach days, and local festivals. The opportunity to visit Thompson's Wild Wonders, an exotic animal sanctuary, came through Amy's cousin Mike, who worked as a caretaker at the facility. David Thompson's collection sprawled across 15 acres of his vast ranch about an hour outside Houston. The successful oil executive had started collecting exotic animals in 2008, riding the wave of private zoos that had swept across America. His compound housed 7 tigers, 4 lions, and various other dangerous predators, all kept in enclosures that barely met minimum state requirements. Amy's cousin, Mike Wilson, at age 35, represented the typical private zoo employee. Despite having no formal zoological training, he had been handling Thompson's big cats for 3 years. Like many private facility workers, his experience came solely from on-the-job learning. Thompson paid well and provided housing on the property, making it an attractive job despite the risks. The girls arrived at 4:30 p.m., just as the Texas summer heat was beginning to fade. The facility's entrance was surprisingly basic, a chain-link gate with a faded warning sign. The compound's crown jewel was Raja, an 8-year-old male Bengal tiger that Thompson had purchased as a cub from an animal dealer in Oklahoma, who had been selling off exotic animals due to financial difficulties. Raja's appearance from his concrete den drew gasps from both girls. At over 500 pounds, he was an impressive sight. Tigers are nature's perfect killing machines. Their bite force exceeds 1,000 pounds per square inch, enough to crush a buffalo's spine. Their paws pack the power to shatter skulls, while their retractable claws can grow up to 4 inches long. Most importantly, despite being born in captivity, they retain all their wild hunting instincts. The evening feeding routine began at 5:15 p.m. Raja's enclosure, a 40 by 60 foot chain-link structure, featured a narrow feeding chute along one side. The fence stood 12 feet high, topped with inward-facing wire that supposedly prevented climbing. Like many private facilities, Thompson's compound used these basic feeding systems rather than the sophisticated safety features found in accredited zoos. Mike retrieved a bucket of raw chicken from a nearby freezer, beginning the familiar feeding routine he'd performed hundreds of times before. Both girls positioned themselves at the designated viewing area approximately 5 feet from the fence. Raja's impressive displays of catching meat in mid-air had both girls reaching for their phones to capture the moment. The attack came without warning. Mike, focused on feeding the animals, didn't notice Jessica moving closer to the fence. She was trying to get the perfect selfie with her iPhone 5S, unconsciously edging closer for a better angle. Amy, distracted by the roar of another tiger, turned momentarily to look away from the enclosure. Mike had seen tourists take similar risks before, assuming they knew the rules. Stay behind the fence, don't get too close. When Raja's attention shifted from the food to Jessica, Mike didn't immediately react. He thought it was just a brief moment. Tigers often fixate on movement. But then he saw Jessica step within 3 feet of the enclosure. That distance triggered the tiger's predatory instincts. Raja lunged. The force of Raja's launch against the fence was explosive. The chain link, weakened by years of Texas weather, gave way at a connection point. The tiger's massive paw shot through the gap, 4-inch claws catching Jessica's shoulder and pulling her towards him. The fence continued to fail as Raja forced his head and shoulders through the widening hole. The attack lasted mere seconds but was devastatingly effective. At around 5:20 p.m., just 5 minutes into the feeding session, Raja's powerful jaws clamped onto Jessica's upper body with immense force, crushing her shoulder and collarbone instantly. His claws tore through flesh and muscle as he attempted to pull her closer. Mike shouted, trying to intervene, but the tiger's grip was unyielding. He hurled more meat at Raja, hoping to distract him, but it was futile. Raja's focus was entirely on his prey, his instincts in full predator mode. The raw power of the attack left Jessica no chance to escape. Amy screamed and tried to grab Jessica, but her efforts were useless against the tiger's overwhelming strength. Fumbling for her phone with trembling hands, Amy dialed 911 at 5:24 p.m. The phone call reached emergency services, but the compound's remote location meant that help was at least 20 minutes away. In the chaos, Mike tried to keep the tiger at bay, but Jessica's body was already being dragged closer to the fence. By the time first responders arrived at 5:44 p.m., Jessica had been unconscious for several minutes, the massive blood loss and trauma proving fatal. The investigation revealed multiple failures. The fence's maintenance records were non-existent. The feeding chute design violated several safety recommendations. The viewing distance guidelines were completely inadequate. Thompson's insurance had lapsed 3 months earlier, and required safety inspections hadn't been performed in over a year. Raja was euthanized despite protests from animal rights groups. The incident sparked fierce debate about private exotic animal ownership in Texas. Thompson's facility was shut down, and his remaining animals were relocated to accredited sanctuaries. Amy Chen became an advocate for stricter exotic animal regulations, even testifying before the Texas legislature. Mike Wilson left the exotic animal industry entirely. The casual atmosphere at private facilities had created a false sense of security, leading to a tragedy that forever changed how Texas regulated its private exotic animal industry. But Jessica wasn't the only one attacked while taking a selfie. Our next story takes us to Katmai National Park, where a group of friends learned the hard way that their jokes could turn deadly. In the vast wilderness of Alaska, Katmai National Park stands as one of nature's most impressive sanctuaries. Spanning over 4 million acres, this pristine landscape is where volcanic forces meet glacial valleys, creating an ecosystem unlike anywhere else in North America. The park's crown jewel, Brooks Falls, draws thousands of visitors each year who come to witness one of nature's most spectacular displays: bears fishing for salmon in the rushing waters. Ethan Carter was a 26-year-old office worker from Portland, Oregon. After 3 years working as an account manager at a local insurance firm, he had finally saved enough for his dream Alaska trip. Living in a modest apartment and driving the same used Honda Civic he'd had since college, Ethan spent his weekends taking casual hikes in Oregon's state parks, though he had no serious outdoor experience. The trip to Alaska had been a year in planning, not because of any particular expertise, but because Ethan wanted to make the most of his limited vacation time. He convinced 3 friends from his apartment complex, Mike Thompson, Chris Rodriguez, and James Chen, to join him. Like Ethan, they were regular guys with regular jobs. Mike worked in IT, Chris was a high school teacher, and James managed a local restaurant. The group arrived in Alaska on September 3, 2018. They spent their first few days exploring Denali National Park, staying in basic lodges and taking guided bus tours. None of them had any experience with true wilderness or dangerous wildlife. Their knowledge of bears came primarily from nature documentaries and basic safety pamphlets provided by the parks. On September 8th, they arrived at Katmai National Park. The weather was unusually clear for September, with temperatures hovering around 65 degrees Fahrenheit and visibility extending for miles. The pristine conditions meant that Brooks Falls would be especially active with both bears and tourists. The morning began like any other at Brooks Falls. Park rangers conducted their daily briefings, warning visitors about maintaining safe distances from wildlife. The viewing platforms were already filling up with tourists by 10 a.m., their cameras aimed at the falls where several bears fished in the rushing waters. By early afternoon, the main viewing platform had become crowded with wildlife photographers. Their expensive equipment, telephoto lenses longer than a man's arm, and camera bodies worth thousands of dollars, captured stunning close-ups of the bears while maintaining a safe distance. Among the bears they photographed was bear number 856, a dominant male who had ruled these waters for nearly a decade. Ethan and his friends arrived at the platform around 2:30 p.m., squeezing through the crowd of serious photographers. The group watched with amusement as the photographers discussed technical details and compared their elaborate equipment. Ethan pulled out his iPhone, holding it up mockingly next to a photographer's massive telephoto lens. Mike and James joined in the joking, laughing about how these photographers needed such expensive gear to take pictures of bears that were right there in front of them. Only Chris seemed uncomfortable with their attitude, having actually read through the park's safety materials during their trip planning. He understood that the expensive equipment wasn't just about getting better pictures. It was about maintaining a safe distance from deadly predators. The casual attitude that had developed during their trip had stripped away any real sense of danger. After days of viewing wildlife from bushes and platforms, the bears had become just another tourist attraction in their minds, like animals in a zoo rather than powerful predators in their natural habitat. As they watched bear number 856 fishing in the falls, the group's playful mockery of the photographers escalated. Mike suggested they could get better photos with their phones than these professionals with their expensive gear. James added that all those fancy cameras were probably just for show. Their jokes and casual attitude fed into Ethan's growing confidence. Brown bears like number 856 are perfectly evolved killing machines. Their massive bodies, weighing up to 1,500 pounds, contain layers of muscles that can generate explosive force. A single swipe from their forearm can decapitate a moose, while their jaws can crush bones with over 1,200 pounds of pressure per square inch. Despite their enormous size, these bears can sprint at speeds reaching 35 miles per hour, faster than any Olympic sprinter. Bear number 856 was particularly impressive, even by Katmai standards. At 1,200 pounds, he had established complete dominance over the prime fishing spots at Brook Falls. Rangers had documented his unusual aggression toward both other bears and any perceived intrusions into his territory. His massive frame carried scars from countless battles, testament to years of violent encounters that had earned him his position at the top of the hierarchy. Spotting what appeared to be a clear path down to the water's edge, Ethan made his fatal decision. He pointed out how he could get a better angle than anyone else on the platform. Chris immediately protested, reminding them about the morning's safety briefing and the multiple warning signs. But his concerns were dismissed with more laughter and jokes. The casual nature of Ethan's decision made it all the more tragic. There was no grand purpose, no professional photography goal, just a young man's impulsive desire to prove he could get closer than others, spurred on by friendly banter and a complete misunderstanding of the danger. As Ethan climbed over the safety railing, Chris made one final attempt to stop him. His voice was tense with genuine concern, but Mike and James were still treating it as a joke, even encouraging Ethan to get closer for a better shot. The other photographers on the platform began noticing the commotion, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others frantically trying to signal the nearby rangers. Ethan walked confidently toward the water's edge, holding his iPhone up as he moved. The 50-yard safety distance established by decades of research and countless bear encounters rapidly diminished. 40 yards, then 30, then just 25 yards from where bear number 856 was fishing. The massive predator noticed the intrusion immediately. The attack unfolded with terrifying speed. Bear number 856 exploded from his fishing spot, covering the distance to Ethan in mere seconds. The bear's charge was silent, no roar, no warning growl, just 1,200 pounds of muscle and fury moving with lethal purpose. Ethan only managed to turn halfway before the first impact. The initial strike came from the bear's left paw, its 4-inch claws tearing through Ethan's jacket and into his back. The force knocked him face first into the ground, driving the air from his lungs. Before he could even process what was happening, the bear's massive jaws clamped down on his right thigh. The bite force of a brown bear exceeds that of a lion or tiger, and bear number 856 demonstrated this power with devastating effect. His teeth crushed through muscle, sinew, and bone like they were paper. The bear's bite severed Ethan's femoral artery instantly, starting a deadly countdown that would end in minutes without immediate medical intervention. As Ethan lay pinned beneath the enormous predator, bear number 856 began what wildlife experts call a killing shake, a violent side-to-side motion designed to tear flesh and break bones. The movement was so powerful it lifted Ethan's entire body off the ground. His screams echoed across the falls, sending tourists scrambling back from the railings in terror. Mike and James stood frozen in shock, while Chris collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed by the horror unfolding before them. Park rangers stationed at the viewing platform reacted immediately. 2 rangers armed with 12-gauge shotguns loaded with slug rounds rushed toward the scene, while another radioed for emergency medical support. But even these experienced professionals were shocked by the brutality of the attack. The bear released its grip on Ethan's leg only to clamp down on his shoulder, its teeth easily puncturing through his collarbone and into his chest cavity. Each bite delivered over 1,200 pounds of pressure per square inch, crushing bones and rupturing internal organs. Blood soaked the ground beneath Ethan's body as bear number 856 continued its assault. Rangers fired warning shots into the air trying to frighten the bear away without risking hitting Ethan. The massive predator paused momentarily, lifting its blood-covered muzzle to assess this new threat. This brief interruption allowed the Rangers to see the full extent of Ethan's injuries. His body lay twisted and broken, with massive wounds visible across his torso and limbs. After what seemed like an eternity but was actually less than 2 minutes, bear number 856 finally retreated, leaving Ethan motionless on the blood-soaked ground. The Rangers rushed forward, their medical training telling them that every second counted. But the damage was catastrophic. Ethan had lost too much blood, and his internal injuries were too severe. Despite immediate medical attention and a desperate attempt to stabilize him for helicopter evacuation, Ethan Carter was pronounced dead at 5:47 p.m. The official autopsy would later reveal the true extent of the bear's power: 37 distinct bite wounds, multiple crushed bones, and severe internal trauma. The right femoral artery had been completely severed, leading to massive blood loss that proved impossible to stop, even with immediate medical intervention. Park officials immediately closed Brook Falls to visitors, evacuating hundreds of tourists from the viewing platforms and surrounding trails. The closure lasted 3 days while investigators documented the scene and assessed safety protocols. This marked only the second fatal bear attack in Katmai's history, the first occurring in 1965 when a park employee surprised a mother bear with cubs. Unlike many bear attack cases where the animal is euthanized, wildlife biologists argued strongly against this course of action. They pointed out that bear number 856 had been defending its established fishing territory and had shown no previous aggression toward humans who maintained proper distance. The decision to spare the bear was controversial, but ultimately supported by both scientific evidence and park policy. The incident made national headlines, with media outlets struggling to understand why an ordinary office worker with no history of reckless behavior would willingly put himself in such grave danger. Park rangers reviewing the case identified a phenomenon they had seen before: the normalization of danger. Days spent watching bears from a safe distance had gradually eroded Ethan's natural fear of these apex predators. The casual atmosphere among his friends and their jokes about professional photographers created a false sense of security, leading to a deadly mistake. But Ethan wasn't the only one who underestimated the risks of taking a selfie with a dangerous animal. In our next story, an Indian man makes an even more reckless decision, breaking into a zoo enclosure to take a selfie with a lion, believing it to be a smart idea. It was September 23, 2023, when India's National Zoological Park in Delhi would witness one of its most horrific lion attacks. By 2023, India's zoos had recorded over 100 serious incidents involving big cats between 2010 and 2023, though only 3 had resulted in fatalities. The Delhi Zoo, however, despite hosting over 3 million visitors annually, had maintained a perfect safety record since its establishment. The nation's capital had seen a surge in zoo visitors that year, with attendance up 25% from 2022. Tourism officials attributed this increase to post-pandemic recovery and improved facilities. Yet this surge brought new challenges: overcrowding during peak hours, increased pressure on security staff, and growing concerns about visitor behavior around dangerous animals. The Delhi Zoo, sprawling across 176 acres in the heart of India's capital, represented India's premier wildlife facility. Established in 1959 during Jawaharlal Nehru's administration, it housed over 1,350 animals across 130 species. The lion enclosure, constructed in 1989 and renovated in 2019, featured a sophisticated design: an 18-foot deep moat surrounding a 21,528 square foot naturalistic habitat, complete with artificial rocks, shade structures, and cooling systems. The facility's security systems reflected modern zoo standards. 15 armed guards patrolled the grounds in rotating shifts, while 128 CCTV cameras monitored key areas. The lion enclosure itself featured multiple safety elements: 3-tier barriers, emergency response stations every 164 feet, and a sophisticated public announcement system. Daily inspections ensured all safety features remained functional, with maintenance logs meticulously maintained as per international protocols. While the Delhi Zoo took every measure to ensure the safety of its visitors, the story of Maqsood Singh highlighted a different kind of vulnerability, one that went unnoticed by the very systems designed to protect. Living with his parents and younger sister in a one-room apartment in East Delhi's Anand Parbat industrial area, Maqsood earned a modest salary of 12,000 rupees, around $144 monthly, at Sharma Garments Factory. His father, disabled from a factory accident years earlier, relied on Maqsood's income. The family's financial struggles made it impossible to address Maqsood's increasingly erratic behavior. Mental health care for many in India's working class remained an unaffordable luxury. The signs of his deteriorating mental state had been visible for months. Co-workers at Sharma Garments noticed his increasing isolation during lunch breaks. His supervisor, Rohan Mehra, had documented several unexplained absences in the past month alone. At home, Maqsood spent hours staring at wildlife documentaries on their small television, particularly fascinated by big cats. His mother later recalled his strange questions about animals' souls and their capacity for mercy. That Tuesday morning began like any other. Maqsood left home at 7 a.m. telling his mother he was heading to work, but he never arrived. Security cameras later captured him wandering the streets for hours, stopping occasionally to watch stray dogs and feed pigeons. At 12:15 p.m., he made an unexpected decision: purchasing a zoo ticket. The 50 rupee entry fee may have seemed insignificant to most, but for Maqsood it was nearly half of his daily wages. Inside the zoo, Sher, an 8-year-old male African lion, embodied nature's perfect predator. Born in South Africa's Pretoria Zoo, he had arrived in Delhi in 2018 as part of an international breeding program. Weighing 400 pounds, his powerful frame was a testament to millennia of evolution, a creature built for the hunt. Under the care of trained staff, his daily routine consisted of regulated feedings, enrichment activities, and constant monitoring. Lions are apex predators whose hunting abilities have been refined over millions of years. Their bite force exceeds 1,000 psi, enough to crush a buffalo's skull. Their paws can deliver 400 pounds of force in a single swipe, while their claws, reaching lengths of 4 inches, can disembowel prey with surgical precision. Their night vision is 6 times better than humans, and their roar can be heard up to 5 miles away. Most importantly, despite years in captivity, they retain every predatory instinct of their wild ancestors. Sher's keepers had noted his particular intelligence. He could recognize individual staff members, understood feeding routines, and displayed all the natural behaviors of wild lions. This included territorial patrolling, scent marking, and most critically, the instinct to eliminate any perceived threats to his domain. At precisely 1:05 p.m., while visitors crowded the viewing area, Maqsood began his fatal journey. Security footage captured him methodically removing his shoes and placing them neatly by the first barrier. The enclosure's triple security system had been designed based on international standards: a 3-foot outer fence, a 4-foot warning barrier with anti-climb spikes, and finally the 18-foot moat. Each barrier bore warning signs in 3 languages, with pictorial warnings for illiterate visitors. The viewing area was particularly crowded that afternoon. A school group from South Delhi had just arrived, their blue uniforms dotting the observation deck. Tourist buses had deposited their usual Tuesday crowds, and local families sought refuge from Delhi's bustling streets. Security cameras captured over 200 visitors in the lion enclosure area at the time. What happened next would raise serious questions about mental health awareness in India's working class. Maqsood scaled the first 2 barriers with unsettling calmness, ignoring shouts from nearby visitors and the frantic whistles of security guards. 2 schoolteachers quickly evacuated their students while other visitors began filming on their phones, a tragic reflection of modern society's response to unfolding disasters. The descent into the moat took exactly 27 seconds according to security footage. Several visitors later reported that Maqsood appeared to be mumbling to himself, his movements deliberate and almost ritualistic. Head security guard Prakash Verma, stationed about 300 feet away, immediately activated the emergency protocol, but the distance proved too great to intervene in time. Maqsood, still fixated on the lion, pulled out his phone. His behavior had become erratic in the days leading up to this moment, and this was the culmination of his growing instability. With little regard for the danger, he stepped closer to the lion's enclosure, deciding to snap a selfie with the wild predator. Ignoring the signs of the lion's territorial behavior and the increasing shouts from visitors to stay away, Maqsood's thoughts seemed consumed with the idea of capturing the moment on his phone. The attack unfolded with terrifying efficiency. Cher, who had been resting near his artificial waterfall, noticed the intrusion immediately. His transformation from relaxed zoo resident to apex predator was instant. Ears flattened, muscles tensed, tail dropped into hunting position. The lion's behavior followed textbook predatory patterns, exactly as his wild counterparts would react to an intruder. The crowd's reaction created chaos. Hundreds of visitors began screaming and throwing whatever they could find. Water bottles, food items, even shoes, trying desperately to distract the lion. Zoo staff, led by head keeper Arvind Rathore, rushed to the scene with fire extinguishers and emergency flares, but they were helplessly far from where the events were unfolding. Cher covered the 98-foot distance in less than 3 seconds, his muscular body launching forward with explosive power. The initial impact knocked Maqsood backward, the lion's 400-pound frame hitting him with the force of a small car. What followed was a display of nature's unrestrained fury that would haunt witnesses for years. The lion's first bite, targeting Maqsood's neck, a natural lion hunting instinct, delivered over 1,000 psi of crushing force. The massive paws, each equipped with retractable claws designed for gripping prey, pinned Maqsood to the ground. Emergency response teams, arriving just 10 minutes after Maqsood began his climb into the enclosure at 1:15 p.m., could only watch as the lion dragged his victim toward the concrete den, following an instinct perfected over millions of years of evolution. The recovery operation finally began at 2:30 p.m. after obtaining necessary permissions from wildlife authorities. Dr. Sunil Verma, the zoo's chief veterinarian, led a team of 6 specialists in the delicate task of sedating Cher. The process required extreme precision. Too little sedative would leave the lion dangerous. Too much could prove fatal to the valuable breeding animal. The operation itself took about 90 minutes. 2 darts containing ketamine and xylazine, carefully measured for Cher's body weight, were required before the lion was sufficiently sedated. Once the sedatives took effect, the team waited an additional 15 minutes to ensure Cher was deeply unconscious and stable, following big cat handling protocols before entering the enclosure. The investigation revealed that Maqsood died almost instantly from the first bite, with crushed cervical vertebrae, trauma from the impact, and deep claw wounds. In response to the attack, the zoo implemented stricter security measures, including taller barriers and additional CCTV cameras, and updating training for staff on handling psychiatric emergencies. Cher, the lion, remained at the zoo, but his enclosure was modified. While the debate over keeping big cats in captivity continued, experts emphasized the importance of well-managed zoos for conservation and education. The incident reinforced the truth that no matter how familiar, a wild animal's instincts can never be fully tamed. Thank you for watching this episode. These stories are a reminder that with nature, one selfie can be deadly. If you want to see some of the dumbest zoo deaths ever recorded, click over to our next video. We'll see you there.